Good morning. Thanks for being here today. I'm Nicole Roddy, Public Information Officer with the Department of Public Safety. We're here to talk about the DWI Holiday Extra Enforcement Campaign. You're going to be hearing from three speakers today: Shannon Grabo with the Office of Traffic Safety, Kyle Pilston with the Chisago County Sheriff's Department, and Colonel Matt Langer with the State Patrol. We also have a couple of our partner agencies here to show support for the upcoming campaign. We will have time for questions at the end. We just ask that you say your name and the organization you're with before your question. I'm going to turn it over to Shannon to get us started.
Thank you. Welcome. We all need a purpose in our personal life and in our jobs. We go to work to earn a living, to pay our bills. But for some people, that purpose is so much more than a paycheck. For many law enforcement officers, responding to that fatal crash can be devastating and heartbreaking. If only they had had the chance to stop that car and arrest that impaired driver, maybe that person would still be alive today. Too many people don't realize their vehicles become deadly weapons when they're impaired. For others, like Sergeant Kyle Pilston from the Chisago County Sheriff's Office, these severe injuries can have lasting, lifetime effects for the person and their families. 3 years ago, Sergeant Kyle Pilston was injured when a drunk driver hit his squad car when he was on duty. Unfortunately, these scenarios play out daily on Minnesota roads. In the last 5 years, from the day before Thanksgiving through December 31st, 50 people died during drunk driving-related crashes. Alcohol-related crashes not only take lives, they change them forever. Alcohol-related crashes contribute to an average of 341 life-changing injuries each year. Drug driving DWI incidents have nearly doubled in the last 5 years compared to the previous 5 years. Impaired is impaired, regardless of the substance. There is so much more work to be done. The Office of Traffic Safety is coordinating the DWI Extra Enforcement and Education Campaign that starts tomorrow and runs through December 31st, where more than 300 law enforcement agencies, including troopers, deputies, and officers, will be looking and arresting impaired drivers. As we prepared for this campaign, we asked law enforcement officers, what's your purpose? Why do you do this job? And what motivates you to arrest drunk drivers? Throughout the campaign, law enforcement will be sharing their stories of why they do what they do and what motivates them, and those will be shared on DPS social media channels, including our partners from Metro Transit, State Patrol, and St. Paul Police Department. Here to share his why is Sergeant Kyle Pilston from the Chisago County Sheriff's Office.
On December 4th, 2020, I was on a traffic stop on Highway 95 east of North Branch, a spot that I've been in a lot of times as a 15-year deputy with the Chisago County Sheriff's Office, and I was working a towards zero death shift. I was trying to find impaired drivers, and at 10:28 p.m., one found me. I was clearing another traffic stop when all of a sudden I heard this violent sound of metal on metal behind me, and it was distinct. I'd never heard a sound quite like that before. And as I was sitting stationary in my squad car, I felt myself hurled forward, and my head hit the top of the roof of the inside of my squad car and snapped backwards. Next thing I knew was I was waking up slumped over the center console of my squad car. I remember looking out the passenger side of my window and seeing a full-size pickup truck in the ditch that had just struck my squad car. I got out of my squad car and looked at the back of it. It was just a hunk of metal kind of pushed forward. I remember looking like an accordion. And I went down and spoke with the driver that was in the truck and got her out and began talking to her. And she was so impaired that she didn't even know that she had been in a crash. And as I began telling her that she had hit a squad car, she thought that I was lying to her. She didn't think that happened at all. So she provided a preliminary breath test on the road, and she gave a reading of .27, so over 3 times the legal limit. And I remember just this intense, sharp headache setting in pretty quickly right after the crash, and that was a Friday night. And by Monday morning, the headache transitioned into head pressure and eye pressure, and I went and saw a concussion specialist and was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. And for the next month, I spent most of my time in a dark room because I couldn't be around any normal light or noise. It felt like normal room light was like I was staring right at the sun. I remember Christmas, spending most of the time in a dark room while the rest of my family celebrated, and spending the next 3 to 4 months recovering from my concussion. But I think one of the most difficult things during that period of time was just wondering if I'd be able to return to work with a brain injury. It's not something you can monitor the healing progress and see that you're getting better. It's an invisible injury, and there was a question in my head if I'd actually ever be able to return to work because the head pressure and the eye pressure that I was experiencing was so significant. But fortunately, after 4 months, I was able to return back to work full time, but I still deal with the effects of the concussion, still have a hard time sleeping. And back in 2004, I had 3 friends that were all brothers that were killed by a drunk driver, and that was while I was going to school for law enforcement. When I got to the sentencing of the female that struck me, I remember being able to read a victim impact statement to the judge, and what I told the judge was I was tired. I was tired of seeing drunk drivers take the lives of people, but also take the quality of life away from people. So this holiday season, law enforcement's going to continue the fight to keep drunk drivers off the road and keep them from injuring or killing others. And really, it's a fight to keep my story from having to be someone else's story. So whether it's through education or whether it's through enforcement, this fight is always a fight worth having. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Matt Langer, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as Chief of the Minnesota State Patrol. And as we heard from the Sergeant and his story and Shannon on the overall emphasis that we're after here today, it's preventing needless tragedy on our roads. We think about our why. Last week I spoke about it at the TZD conference, but as I was standing here today, it dawned on me that 24 years ago today, actually, in the city of St. Paul on Interstate 94, as a brand new trooper at the time, I showed up at the first fatal crash that I had been dispatched to or sent to as a state trooper. And it happened to be an impaired driving related fatal crash where a 20-year-old young woman was killed at the hands of an impaired driver. And so when we think about our why, and I remember that day vividly 24 years ago and being at Regions Hospital and sitting in the room with her family as her family showed up and was spending time with their loved one who was now dead. It doesn't take long to have a festering and growing frustration at the things that are preventable. And so when we show up at these fatal crashes as cops, deputies, troopers, every single one of them is preventable. So our message today is really simple. The reasons why people might use alcohol or cannabis or other drugs or many drugs is super complex and well beyond what we can cover today. But the reasons why people drive after consuming makes no sense. So our message today is really simple. Plan ahead. If you're going out and going to enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday or the upcoming holiday season leading up toward New Year's Eve, we're not standing here saying don't go out and have a good time or don't enjoy yourself. But what we are saying is if you plan to drive, there is no excuse for planning a sober ride or a ride-sharing service or public transportation or not driving at all. The options are plentiful, certainly now more than they were 24 years ago. There was no excuse then, there is no excuse now. If you're planning to use, do so responsibly, and whatever you do, plan for a sober ride so that you can get where you're going safely. Our goal, sometimes we don't talk about it in this way, but the most beautiful night before Thanksgiving weekend is one where none of our agencies are able to find an impaired driver. Our goal is actually not to arrest people for impaired driving. We're ready for those who don't listen to our message, but it would be a beautiful night if everyone had a good time and chose to not drive after consuming. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Tim Harlow with the Star Tribune. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how effective are these campaigns? Have you seen progress? Why do we do these?
The question is, how effective are these campaigns and have we seen progress? Without a doubt, we've seen progress. The number of people killed on Minnesota roads is much lower than it has been historically if you look way back. Over the past few years, there's been some hiccups, as there have been in every state across the country. But as we stand here today, traffic fatalities are about 15% lower on Minnesota roads than they were last year. Although we're proud of that progress, we're still not proud of that number. But a big part of that number is related to the work that we all do, specifically on speeding, on distracted driving, lack of seatbelt use, and impairment, because those are the 4 things that kill people. And that's exactly what we're focusing on right now, because we know people have plans, they have holiday parties, they have things, family functions that relate to using alcohol or consuming other substances. And our message is really simple: plan ahead so that we can get people where they want to be safely.
And how many of these DWI campaigns do we run per year?
Question is, how many do we run per year? We can get you the actual data from the Office of Traffic Safety, but they run periodically during seasons when we know there are challenges like this one right now, and other ones tied to holidays like St. Patrick's Day.
Quinn Gorham, Gray TV, Bureau reporter. Can you guys talk a little bit about the specific challenges you guys face during the holidays, maybe the increase in numbers you guys deal with among the DWIs during the holiday season?
I can speak for what we see, and then if anyone else wants to step forward, they can. Question related to kind of the increase in traffic that we see. So this was an interesting period of time in Minnesota, because we know there's a lot of people going north to hunt. And then on Thanksgiving, there are just traffic patterns that are different as people are going to and from. Shopping experiences on Friday bring challenges too. So the police officers, deputies, and troopers are well aware of what's going on in their community, and they're well aware of those traffic patterns that shift throughout the year, especially during the holiday time, which is exactly, again, why we're doubling down on our message that we're out there and we're looking for the people who make a bad decision to get behind the wheel after they've been drinking.
Do you guys have any specific numbers about maybe the percent increase in DWI arrests that are made during this time of year?
Do you have?
We can get you.
We'll get you the actual data. I didn't want to put anyone on the spot. Yeah.
Are you finding drunk drivers at all hours of the day now, where it used to be like a long time ago, it was a night thing, but is it all hours of the day?
The question relates to the timing and when we're finding impaired drivers. So I can speak from the State Patrol perspective that the alcohol use tends to still be nights and weekends. When it comes to drug impaired driving or polysubstance abuse driving, it's just as often that it would be Tuesday at 10 a.m. that it would be Friday night at midnight. So in the past several years, as we've seen some of the polysubstance use and the drug impaired driving increase, that time frame that we need to look for impaired drivers has shifted. 24 years ago, it was kind of a Friday, Saturday night targeted enforcement campaign. That's just not true today with the habits of people.
So you'll be out at all hours of the day then, looking for people?
Well, the State Patrol, we're out all the time looking for people, but there's never a time when we're not looking for impaired drivers. But this campaign is specifically around times when it'll be most advantageous for us to prevent poor decision making.
Brittany, I'm in Channel 5. Is there a specific age range that you see when you're pulling people over? Is it a younger crowd, or is it kind of across the board?
That's a great question. The age range. Again, anecdotally, we tend to think that it's the risk takers. So you could think young men, 18 to 24-ish, and the data might support that. But just as I say that, I know everyone up here is thinking about the person that they arrested who was in their 60s, or when I just said young men, they arrest young women. So the challenges with behaviors with impaired driving don't discriminate. So we see all walks of life making poor decisions sometimes. So I wouldn't say that it's a specific targeted population, because it never ceases to surprise us, the people that sometimes make a really poor decision.
What kind of advice do you guys have for folks who maybe on the Thanksgiving holiday have a relative who's quite intoxicated and is insisting on potentially driving home? What can they say to those relatives?
Question is, what do you do if you see a relative who maybe had too much to drink, or a friend? That's a great question. Intervene is what we would recommend. So try to talk some sense into them. Usually you can see that freight train kind of rolling downhill before it gets to that point where it's a problem. And so trying to intervene early when maybe there's a little more hope for a logical conversation is helpful. If you're unsuccessful in intervening, we always urge people to call 911 and report unsafe driving if they have some specific information that we can then act on.
Do you find it tend more people in the city, rural? Does it matter geography in the state? Is it any patterns?
The question is, does it matter related to geography? No, the data would support that there are police officers arresting impaired drivers in every corner of the state.
Hey, Colonel, real quick, could you explain polysubstance, what that means?
Polysubstance is a term that we use when people are choosing to consume multiple substances. So a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of cannabis, maybe a prescription drug or over the counter. It's using multiple substances at once.
Speaking of cannabis, this will be the first holiday season with the drug being legal in the state of Minnesota. Have you guys seen any uptick in cannabis-related DWIs, and are you guys expecting to see more this holiday season?
We don't have data right now. Back up. The question is about cannabis impaired driving and what we expect to see. So I don't have data standing here right now to say since August 1st, X, Y, and Z. We expect there to be additional recreational use of cannabis because it's illegal. We're hopeful that our message of making wise decisions resonates with people, and those that are choosing to consume legally don't decide to get behind the wheel because it's every bit as dangerous and it's every bit as illegal. So too early to tell what the data is showing, but common sense says that more people will likely be using, and so now's the time to plan ahead.
I was gonna respond to Mr. Harlow's question about how many campaigns that we do. We actually have 2 national campaigns throughout the year. The 2 national campaigns are right now and then Labor Day. Those are the national campaigns, but we really run and fund enforcement, impaired driving enforcement, sustained all year long with some different special project funding to hit the bigger holidays and things like that. So it's literally all weekend, or every weekend all year long.